Hello everyone! Welcome to The Infinite Chapter, your go-to podcast for unraveling the stories hidden within the pages of books. Here, as always, with my dear John, the guardian of letters.
And I'm delighted to be back. Today we have a work in our hands that takes us back to a world we know very well, but to explore its roots, its soul, the cradle of it all, Sicily. By the way, Jane, I've always wanted to ask you, have you ever had the luck to set foot on that island?
Oh, of course. Years ago, I took a trip with some friends from college, and it was a wonderful experience. I remember the intensely blue beaches, and the people were so welcoming. And don't even get me started on the food, John. I haven't tasted a cannoli like that ever since.
And in that land of contrasts, where the sweet and the bitter coexist, is where Puzo gives us a kind of sequel and prequel at the same time to The Godfather, a story that many purists adore.
It seems you've left us all wanting more. To start untangling this plot, why don't you tell us a bit about its creator, the master Mario Puzo? What makes this book so special in his bibliography?
Of course, that's the foundation of it all. Mario Puzo, for those who don't know him, is the quintessential Italian-American chronicler of the Mafia in fiction. He was born in the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood of New York, into a working-class immigrant family. He was the youngest of 12 siblings and, interestingly, always felt more comfortable in libraries than on the street, observing from a safe distance. His first novel, The Dark Arena from 1955, already showed that interest in the underworld, but the definitive consecration would not come until much later.
So, he didn't grow up surrounded by real mobsters, did he? It's something people always wonder. How did he get interested in writing about the Mafia if his childhood was more about books and studies?
That's a fantastic question, and he himself clarified it many times. Puzo never had direct ties to organized crime. His fascination didn't come from the crime itself, but from the humanity behind it. What interested him was family, loyalty, power, and betrayal within a very particular culture. In his neighborhood, he saw those men of respect as figures of power, almost like princes, and that intrigued him. The success of The Godfather in 1969 catapulted him, and it allowed him to dedicate himself entirely to his passion. The Sicilian, published 15 years later, in 1984, is the result of that maturity. It's a novel that connects directly to The Godfather, because it brings back Michael Corleone during his exile in Sicily. It's not a simple spin-off, it's a narrative bridge that takes us to the heart of the original Cosa Nostra.
And it's precisely Michael Corleone who gives us the excuse for this trip, right? Although he isn't the protagonist, he's the catalyst for the story. Can you give us a brief summary of what the reader will find?
The novel plants us in Sicily in 1950. Michael Corleone is about to return to the United States, but his father has entrusted him with one last mission: to bring Salvatore Giuliano, a legendary bandit who existed in real life, with him. Now, here's the twist, because the book isn't about Michael. He is just the observer. The plot focuses entirely on the life of this legendary bandit. It's a novelized biography, if you want to look at it that way.
So, Puzo uses Michael as a luxury tour guide through post-war Sicily. I love that idea. And what kind of character was this Giuliano? He sounds like a kind of Robin Hood, right?
Exactly. That's the popular perception. Puzo tells us about the rise and fall of Giuliano, from a young idealist who, due to a series of circumstances, is forced to become a bandit. He fought against the government in Rome and the Mafia, and for that reason the people saw him as a hero. Puzo uses a structure of flashbacks to go back in time and show us his story. The plot is a detailed and novelized biography of Giuliano, from his first steps to his tragic and, in a way, predictable death. And poor Michael, who is just there to find him, finds himself in the middle of this whirlwind.
It's a brilliant way to keep us anchored in the Godfather universe without the book being a simple repetition. And John, in terms of storytelling, what do you think makes this narrative so powerful, beyond the central character?
Well, look, the book is full of moments that stick with you. For example, there's a very tense scene where Michael has to negotiate with an old and cunning Sicilian capo, a man who is nothing like his father, Don Vito, but who wields a silent and brutal power. It's a fascinating contrast. And then, on the other hand, you have those passages that immerse you in the daily life of the bandits, their rituals, their codes of honor, and the betrayal that is always lurking in the shadows.
I see. It's like Puzo shows us that mob violence isn't just a business, but a way of life, with its own rules and a constant fragility. It's the kind of detail that makes the book unforgettable.
The most fascinating thing is the way Puzo merges real history with fiction. The novel doesn't feel like a documentary, but rather like a raw and realistic epic. The pace might be a bit slower than in The Godfather, it's true, but it's a deliberate pace, a complete immersion in post-war Sicily. Puzo uses an omniscient narrator that allows us to see the lives of everyone, from the bandit to the peasant and, of course, the mobster, and he humanizes them all.
In other words, he invites you to empathize even with the villain.
Exactly. Giuliano's arc is a lesson in tragic idealism. He starts as a hero driven by a thirst for justice, but the brutal environment, betrayals, and the weight of his own legend consume him. Puzo uses Michael Corleone as a contrast. Michael is a product of modern, efficient American organized crime, and he contrasts him with the Sicilian system, which is archaic, complex, based on honor, betrayal, and omerta. And betrayal, in fact, is a brutal narrative driver in this novel. It is the recurring theme that closes the cycle of violence.
Those connections and symbolisms are what make Puzo's work so rich. And speaking of connections, what are the hidden gems, those Easter eggs that Puzo leaves for the most attentive readers?
There are a few. First, and most importantly, Salvatore Giuliano was a real character. Puzo based his novel on his life, although he obviously took narrative liberties to make it fit his story. His death is a historical mystery, and Puzo offers us a fictional version that has become very popular.
I can just imagine Mafia historians analyzing every detail.
Right. Additionally, the character of Don Croce Malo, the capo of capos, is inspired by the real figure of Don Calovizini, a historical Sicilian mafia leader. Puzo turns him into an even more sophisticated figure. And finally, what I like most is that the presence of Michael Corleone deepens his character. By witnessing the origin of the law of silence, the omerta, and the way the friends of friends operate, he understands where the lessons his father gave him came from. It's like the missing piece in the puzzle of his own story.
You can tell you enjoy it, but let's be honest, the book didn't reach the same status as The Godfather. What was the reception of The Sicilian when it was released?
It was a bestseller, without a doubt, but it didn't become the cultural phenomenon of its predecessor. Many critics praised it for its narrative ambition and its ability to bring a complex historical period to life. However, they also pointed out that its slow pace and biographical structure detracted from the dramatic tension that made The Godfather an unrivaled masterpiece. But its vivid portrayal of post-war Sicily has influenced many other works in the genre.
And I know there's a movie. What's that like?
Well, the 1987 film adaptation, directed by Michael Cimino, was a commercial and critical failure. The production company made the fateful decision to cut Michael Corleone's participation for the movie version, which completely betrayed the spirit of the novel and alienated fans. It's a clear example of how a studio can ruin a great story.
I see, that's a shame. And now, moving to the subjective side, what's your personal assessment, John? You who love Puzo's world, what do you think of The Sicilian in retrospect?
Look, for me, The Sicilian is a true gem that is always unjustly overshadowed by its predecessor. The fact that Michael is there is just a nod. The true richness of the novel lies in the story of Salvatore Giuliano. Puzo weaves a narrative so epic that you can almost feel the dust of the Sicilian mountains, the bitter taste of betrayal. It goes beyond being a simple mob novel. It is a profound reflection on justice, loyalty, and how idealism can be both a liberating force and a deadly trap. It is an essential read for anyone who wants to truly understand Puzo's universe, and for those who enjoy a good bandit story with a fascinating historical background.
Well, unlike most people, I value it a lot. While it doesn't have the tension of The Godfather, which is a pure thriller, this book is a human and sociological portrait of a land and a culture. I like that Puzo takes the time to show us these characters in their daily lives, their struggle to survive, and how honor and betrayal are two sides of the same coin. And the figure of Giuliano moves me, because he is the idealism of a young man clashing with the harsh reality of power. It's a more melancholic, sadder work, but just as powerful in its own way. Well, John, it looks like today's episode has come to an end.
Wow, we've already reached the end? The podcasts feel shorter every day. Maybe we'll have to do a double session.
That would be a pleasure. But for today, we say goodbye. If you liked the show, subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. And don't forget that you can leave a comment telling us what book you'd like us to discuss in a future podcast. Remember that you can listen to us on Spotify and watch us on our YouTube channel. See you next time.
See you next time, Jane. And to you who are listening, don't forget that books are passports to other worlds. Sometimes the greatest adventure is waiting on your bookshelf. So choose your next destination and embark on the journey. We'll read to you soon.